The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents Love the Sinner, Hate the Sin. So I was starting to work on a version of this video and had kind of outlined where it was going to take me and what my thoughts were when all of a sudden I was doing an episode of The Hang Up and somebody called in and their question was, why does Matt hate the saying, love the sinner, hate the sin, when he likes something else? And I went ahead and punted on the call and said, hang on, I'm going to be releasing a video about this. So here's that video, and it's taken a slightly different turn because I don't hate the saying, love the sinner, hate the sin, in one very important context. And in another, I absolutely do. And that's why I wanted to make a video talking about this one saying and what's wrong with it and what's right about it. So first of all, what don't I like about it? Well, it's not in the Bible. Granted, the fact that something isn't in the Bible isn't enough to make me like it or not like it, but it's not in the Bible. It's not even really in the Bible in loose structures as far as I can tell. And yet it's used all the time by Christians as if they were citing something that were in fact biblical. Now, it's true that you can get to the sort of thing that kind of roughly feels like love the sinner, hate the sin, by turning the other cheek and, caring about all people irrespective of gender or race or color or anything else. But none of those passages specifically go to, here is a sinner. You can be upset with what they've actually done, but you need to, love them and treat them as a valued person. The problem that I have with love the sinner, hate the sin comes from years and years and years of hearing it used by people in my churches as a way to excuse their bigotry. Because while they would claim to love the person, I don't think that that's true. I think, in fact, what they were doing many times was anything other than love. They were wanting an excuse for, here, this person that we met in our community, this person is a drug addict, and Jesus hung out with prostitutes and other people who we would look down on as Christians. So here's this person with an addiction problem. Let's love bomb them. But what's happening in Christianity isn't, they're not loving the person. They're loving the idea of what the person can be. They have imagined a person on the other side of this ordeal who has recovered from their addiction or is no longer sinning in the way they were. That person has now been redeemed, and that's the person that they love. This concept, I think it's more significant than a lot of people would want to give it credit for being. I could be wrong. This is just how I see it after all these years. And it's not limited to just Christians. For example, I've met people who are in love with the idea of being in love. And so they fall in love at the drop of a hat with anybody and everybody around them. And they say, oh, I love this person, I love this person. When it's what they really love is the security, they love the notion of being in love, all these things, and not as much the person. The person is sort of the vehicle that allows them to get to the things they love, or the vessel that is carrying the things they love. But within Christendom, I don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are many Christians who genuinely love all people, or pretty much all people. And so when one of them says something like love the sinner, hate the sin, they're being genuine. But quite frankly, in my upbringing, watching people who were clearly racist and didn't realize it, clearly bigoted in some way and didn't always realize it, watching them excuse their behavior towards non-Christians or people who didn't fit their mold, and then they'll say, what they say, love the sinner, hate the sin, while essentially gossiping about the sinner and talking crap about the sinner. My problem with the statement is probably more tied to this notion of sin, because within Christianity, many of the things that are identified as a sin, or that were strongly identified as a sin while I was growing up, are things that I don't have a problem with. Homosexuality, for example, I have zero problem with that, and yet supposedly it's a sin. And so the Christians would say, when it comes to the gay folks, love the sinner, hate the sin. So you should be compassionate towards them and be loving towards them because they're human beings who God loves, and then you should not be tolerant of their sinful nature. The problem is that the thing that they're not being tolerant of isn't a problem. It's nobody's business. It's not any of your concern at all. And yet, that entire segment is a way of not only A, making you feel superior to someone, B, making you feel doubly superior to them because you already think you're superior by not engaging in their sin. And now you think you're even more superior by not holding their sin against them. I should use your sin as an excuse to not have any interaction with you, but I'm going to love the sinner and hate the sin, and so now I'm going to actually interact with you. It's a disgusting little parade of self-importance and being absolutely convinced that your view is right when you have no reason to. I was reminded of this before the person who emailed, or the person who called in to the hang-up, because I was watching season 4 of The Crown on Netflix. And it struck me as odd that I've watched 4 seasons of this show. I thoroughly enjoy it. I knew about most of the events. It is a docudrama or a documentary style miniseries. I don't think it gets everything right. And yes, I'm sure I'll hear from my friends in the UK saying, "Oh my gosh, don't judge anything based on The Crown because it gets this wrong and this wrong and this wrong." That's not the point of this. The point is, I despise the very notion of a monarchy. If there were something in my worldview that I would consider a sin, and there's really not, I reject the entire notion of sin, that your thoughts could harm a god, essentially is what sin boils down to. But if we were just to use sin as a sort of a colloquialism for things that were fundamentally, foundationally immoral, then the very notion of a monarchy would be. And I'm saying that of all forms of monarchy, both the ones where they are legitimately the ruling class and the ones where they are just the tourist attraction, which is one of the arguments that some people give for maintaining the monarchy. Oh, do you know how much tourism it brings in? But now you've relegated this entire family to a sort of prison of privilege where they're not really any more significant than who's in the Ronald McDonald costume when we're greeting visitors to Ronald McDonald Playland, or who's in the Mickey Mouse suit when we're greeting people to Euro Disney. That notion that one group of people, by virtue of birth, have some greater standing in life or value in life or are worth reverence, and that I'm vehemently opposed to. So I can absolutely despise the notion of a monarchy, and I can absolutely despise any implementation of a monarchy, and still care about, both as an interest, a curiosity, and as a compassionate exercise towards other human beings, royals. Like, I'm not obsessed with the royals. Apart from this documentary, I didn't really care. I didn't watch too many of the royal weddings, or I'd catch a little piece of it because it was on TV. It didn't matter to me who these people married or that there was a big state wedding. It was like empty pomp and circumstance. It was, we have nothing better to celebrate, so we're going to look at these two people getting married. I have no objection to either one of them. I've never met either of them. I suspect that they may in fact be fine people despite having lived that life. But I can absolutely despise the notion of a monarchy and still care about and even be friends with and friendly towards royals. Because in some ways, these are people who are overcoming an adverse circumstance. Oh my gosh, somebody out there listening to this just messed themselves at the very notion that I would suggest that one of the wealthiest families ever, the very pinnacle of privilege, was in any way in a position that was uncomfortable. I understand. I'm not remotely It's not like we're going to need to start a GoFundMe for them. It's not that we need to, have a let's rescue the royals from the palace sort of thing. But it's a recognition that all of us as human beings have different challenges that we're going to face. And the things that the family sacrificed in order to keep up the pretenses, I suppose, of that monarchy, denying love and, arranging marriages and all these other things. I find it really disgusting, but they had no more choice over the world that they were born into than me. Are they the beneficiaries of mountains of privilege? You bet. Are some of them batshit crazy? You bet. I hear the Prince of Wales is incredibly fond of homeopathy, and somebody should take that gentleman aside and let him know that homeopathy is just a bunch of woo-woo, that there's no actual science there, but that's not my issue. My issue is that, hey, I can, in fact, hate the sin and love the sinner. And I can do it without any sense of being superior or smug, and I can do it without even a notion of sin. And that's by recognizing that as a humanist, my job is to care about all people, and that while we still hold people responsible for their actions, and people are born into the world at varying degrees of privilege, that what happens in someone's life is divided into two categories. Things that they themselves are directly responsible for or have a hand in, and things that they don't. And that probably it's in our best interest to not hold people responsible for things that are outside of their control. And when they take actions to try to bring those things within their control, they're exercising the best sort of humanity that they can. So, love the sinner, hate the sin? Yeah. I mean, I'm still strongly opposed to this notion of sin, and I'm strongly opposed to this smug, holier than thou, doubly good, way better than you stuff that goes on when people tend to utter love the sin and hate the sin. But as far as the concept of recognizing that there is a person, and that person is going to be responsible for their actions, and that person is also going to have things dictate their life that they're not responsible for, and that we need to draw a line and exercise as much compassion as we can for the actions that they took, and make sure that we aren't adding an undue burden because of actions that they had no say in. See you next time. Bye-bye.
This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.